Hello and welcome to the One Life Church devotional series. If this is your first day with us and you read 2 chapters a day from now for the next 20 months, you will cover the entire Bible. Our readings today are Genesis chapter 28 and Acts chapter 14. Now, Genesis 28 shows us a gateway, a doorway, a mysterious doorway into heaven. I've got a couple of creative daughters, and my one daughter has this mysterious curtain, this doorway, and it leads into like an inner sanctuary of one of her rooms. There's all sorts of things inside there. But this is the gateway. Chapter 28 is talking about a gateway to heaven. And it's enveloped in the story of Jacob, who's running away from his brother who wants to kill him. And he has a dream that night where God, meets him in this dream. And basically, this is what happens. Angels were ascending on a stairwell from Jacob up into heaven. And God comes and says to him, I made myself known to Abraham, your grandpa, and Isaac, your dad. I make myself known to you now. And this is what he says to him. And all people on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. He says you're going to have a great, great family. And you, through your offspring, are going to bless the whole world. What was he talking about? Well, he's talking about Jesus. There was an offspring coming in that lineage, and that was Jesus. And through Jesus, the whole world was going to have access to God, was going to have a gateway to heaven, and was going to be blessed. And in fact, remember when Jesus said, when he called Nathanael in John chapter 1, he said, Nathanael, you're astonished because I saw you under a fig tree. Why, haven't seen anything yet. You're going to see heaven open and angels ascending, descending on the Son of Man, on me. In other words, what was he saying to that Israelite? He was saying to him, listen, Jacob, your ancestor, was told he was going to bless the world. It's going to be through me. Jesus was the one that was born of Jacob that was going to affect the entire world. And so Jacob says this, verse 17, he was afraid. How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, the gate of heaven. The house of God ought to be the gate of heaven. Why? The house of God is about Jesus. The house of God should be presenting Jesus. The house of God should be showing Jesus. In fact, this is the very first time the house of God or the church is mentioned. And it says that the house of God should be a gateway, should be pointing to Jesus, giving us access to heaven. So chapter 14 describes the house of God, describes the church. And I'm going to go through it very quickly now, picking up some of the characteristics of what a church looks like that's a gateway to heaven. Now we know Jesus is the way to the Father, but that church is the gateway to heaven because it presents Jesus. You should walk into the doors of a church, be able to walk through Jesus into heaven. And so chapter 14 says, as usual, Paul and Barnabas went into synagogues to preach the gospel. In a church, to be a gateway, it's got to be preaching the gospel. And then the Lord confirmed the message by enabling them to perform signs and wonders, powers in the church, opens people's eyes, gateway to heaven. And then what happened was that they saw a guy who was paralyzed, and they said to him, you've got faith to be healed, stand up. There should be healing in the house of God, gateway to heaven. Then, what happened is the people came and they said, look at all these miracles that sacrificed to Paul and Barnabas. They're called one Zeus, one Hermes. And Paul and Barnabas said, are you mad? They tore their clothes. We glorify God only. The church of God should glorify Jesus only, the gateway to heaven. And then they were stoned, Paul and Barnabas. So part of the blood of the martyrs, part of the persecution of the church is bringing glory to God and showing people through their sacrifice the gateway to heaven. And then they preached the gospel, verse 21 says, in that city and one large numbers. Church should be preaching the gospel, seeing people saved, gateway to heaven. Then they strengthened the disciples and encouraged them to remain true to the faith. True to the faith, gateway to heaven. They appointed elders there. Verse 23 says, and they fasted and prayed, appointing elders, having leaders, following Jesus, fasting, praying, gateway to heaven. And then from there, they sailed back. And so for a church to be a gateway to heaven pointing to Jesus must have a global vision, an idea to get the gospel to the entire universe. What a great couple of chapters today. Jesus being introduced in Genesis as the access to the Father, the blessing of the whole world. And the church carries him, and in so doing is the gateway to heaven.